All right, it's 3:31. If you're not here, you're officially late. Subject to ridicule upon walking in late. It can happen, but none of you have to worry about that. So hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Zajac. I'm a director of product management for Carbonite and Webroot. You may ask yourself, do you have two jobs? Do you get paid two salaries? The answer is no, I get paid one salary to do two jobs. So Carbonite, most of us do, right? So Carbonite and Webroot joined forces earlier this year, so we're now one company. And I'm here to talk to you about some of the things as to why we do that and why we think that's a great solution and offering for you. So I'm not in sales. I'm not here to sell you anything, more just educate you about what we do and how we do it and how we think that that can help benefit you. I do have one rule for all of my presentations. My presentation does not end, and happy hour is next, until people ask 3 good questions. Not average questions, not bad questions, 3 good questions. All right? Bonus points if you stump me. I love getting stumped in front of a room of 50 people. Really helps my pride, but go for it. It's a lot of fun. Okay? And I did bring my peanut gallery here. These are my coworkers as well. So, yeah, they're, feel free to jump in and laugh as well with them. Okay, so the name of the presentation is A Day at the Breach. My last bad joke for the beginning here is going to be I almost showed up in wearing floaties, wearing a nice bathing suit, but then I realized that might not be appropriate, so I didn't. So anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, about what that looks like for SMBs, data protection, how these things come together, and what kind of our strategy is around this for you guys going forward. Don't forget the 3-question rule. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of take an understanding of where we live in the world today. So I like to first take a step back. So 10 years ago, the way that we secured systems, the way we built applications and built servers is very different from how we do it now. Right, so I look back 10 years ago when I was running operations and running some applications. We did things like we just put passwords in config files. Right? We thought we were doing pretty good if we put our web servers in a DMZ. If we patched our servers once a quarter, that was pretty good as well. A lot of the things that happened 10 years ago, they weren't best practices. They were the reality practices of a lot of us, are now no longer acceptable at all. Right? The world has moved on from a security posture perspective as far as what you need and what you're expected to do. But what happens is that as the world moves on, as the hackers get more sophisticated, as they constantly try to stay 2 or 3 steps ahead of cybersecurity companies and you guys trying to protect your systems, mistakes get made, right? So I look at some of these really big names up here, right? All the breaches that we know about that have happened, really big names. A lot of these are companies that did exactly that. They built an application 10 years ago. They built it with pretty decent practices 10 years ago. The world moved on, got more sophisticated, and what do you know? Somebody got in and got something bad out of the system. Right? It's not like these really big companies weren't trying. Right? They were trying their best, but the hackers were trying a little bit harder or did a little bit better. So I think this is kind of an important thing to realize, to say, look, no matter how much effort some of these people put in, bad things still happen. And a lot of what we need to do from a cybersecurity perspective and from a data protection standpoint is to try to mitigate as many of these different vectors and as many of these different areas as possible. Okay. So those are really big companies, right? They've got a lot of people on staff, right? Facebook, Capital One, they're putting all the effort in, all the money that they can, all the best practices, right? They're paying teams and teams of people to do this. And a lot of hackers have realized this and they've caught on. And so what's actually shifted in the past few years is that the target market, and it is a market for hackers, right? They're trying to make money, has shifted from attacking enterprises to attacking small businesses, right? And you can ask yourself, like, well, it's easy to look and say, I've got 50 people, like, what would the hackers want from me, right? Like, they're not going to make that much money. Why would they even try to attack me? But what they've realized is that the amount of effort they have to put into hacking an enterprise is so much greater, right, the amount of time, than it is to hack an SMB. I can go and I can get into probably 10 or 20 SMBs and get a little bit of data. It's a volume play, right? Get into a whole bunch of them, get a bunch of data from each one, and it's actually less time than for me to get into a large enterprise account and try to get something really valuable. So the target market, again, it is a market, and the target that these hackers are going after is the small businesses. There's a lot of reasons for this, right? It's not that we're bad people. It's not that we're not trying. It's that in the SMB world, it's easier to break through some of the cybersecurity practices that people have, right? How many of you here, you don't have to raise your hands, but are one person maintaining an entire IT department, right? Most of you probably don't have, this is my InfoSec person, and this is my application security, and this is my network security, different from my network engineer. It's like, no, it's me, right? I do all of this. And so how do I actually want to spend my time? I'm trying to do the best that I can. I'm trying to keep my company protected. where do I need to spend my time in doing this? So, the hackers have realized, kind of a few of these core things. Right? We're not all cybersecurity experts, right? You're all IT experts. You all know what you're doing, but it's hard to have expertise in one particular area, right? A lot of people have to be generalists, masters of many, many things in this world. A lot of us have tight budgets, right? A lot of you have tight budgets, right? As soon as you go to someone and say, well, I just need to upgrade every server, and I just need to buy 4 more pieces of software to put on it, and it'll just cost, $100,000, no big deal. A lot of you are probably going to get told to find a way to do it with less, right? Yeah, you can have 10,000, not 100,000. And so people know this, right? It's a lot easier to attack the SMBs and to get in because of this. And then another big point is that when hackers get in, they know that in SMBs, you guys are more likely to pay ransom to pay their Bitcoin than a large enterprise, right? If you have only 50 people, the amount of data that's stored on one laptop or one server, right? Think about laptops for a moment. It's probably 1/50th of your business value, right? If it gets onto 10, that's 20% of your overall data on laptops. In an enterprise, if they get onto 1, it's like 1/2000th, right, of a business. It's a lot smaller. So that makes you more vulnerable to paying ransom. They know that. They can jack up the price. They can get you to pay it. So hackers know that they can come into the SMBs and attack it and be really, really successful at doing that. So, the way we kind of look at it is you need to protect yourself from all of these different areas, right? Malicious insiders is a big one. So we'll talk a little bit about how you layer security and protect against some insider threats. All right, be careful trying to take pictures. Everything self-destructs. Right, so you need to protect yourself against some of these known threats, right? Ransomware coming in, malicious insiders coming in, but then you also need to think about how security impacts your overall compliance posture. So for example, if you work in healthcare, right, HIPAA data, it's really, really expensive if you make a mistake, right? If you have to file that you had a HIPAA breach. If you work with credit card data, really, really expensive, right? If you're doing a PCI compliance, if you get breached, then you have to declare that. If you have anybody in Europe that's ever bought your product and you have their email address sitting in your database, you're subject to GDPR, right? As the world moves on, things are getting more and more strict, right? So this GDPR law you may have heard about in Europe, where basically you have to know everything about every European citizen that you have and you have to be able to delete it, is starting to come more and more into the US. So California recently adopted a rule that's very similar, that you as a business need to know every information you have about Californian citizens, you need to be able to correct it, you need to be able to delete it. Massachusetts is probably going to pass a similar law. Vermont, similar law. Michigan, similar laws. So it's becoming more and more impactful to say it's not only about protecting bad guys getting in, but it's also about your own business not having to pay out a huge fine for some sort of compliance regulation that you find yourself having to deal with. And it's impossible to actually know all of the regulations, right, and actually understand and maintain them. That's an entire department, right? I can say at Carbonite, we're a 1,600-person company. Sometimes we struggle to keep up with what all the regulations are, right? It's a full-time job for a full-time team to understand a lot of this. So you're kind of left in the spot, well, all I can really do is apply best practices and hope that that's good enough. So that's where you kind of need to focus. So the way that we recommend doing this is what we call defense in depth. So I'm going to give you a really simple analogy for what this means. Some people call it fancy terms like multi-vector attack or multi-layered approach to security. I want you to think about crossing a street. All right? Crossing a street is a kind of inherently dangerous situation. Right? You're a pedestrian. You're going to walk in front of a bunch of vehicles traveling down the road at 60 miles an hour. Right? That sounds kind of dangerous. But we've utilized a multi-layered approach to make it safer. Right? So we painted crosswalks on the road. We tried to get everyone to go to one area. Right? We put up stoplights, trying to get the cars to stop. Then we put up the stop sign for the pedestrians, the walk sign or the stop sign. That wasn't good enough. Some people started to run out when there was 1 second left, so we started making a countdown, right? 10 seconds left, 8 seconds left, 6. Still wasn't good enough. We had to kind of have on the sidewalk an audible alert, right? Wait. Yeah, that's my impression, right? So we put all of these different layers of approach in to try to protect people from crossing the street. Right? It's a very simple analogy, but it's the same exact way to look at cybersecurity. Right? You have to have different guardrails in place at different areas to try to protect you. Right? So you have a firewall at the edge of your business. You're trying to prevent people from getting in, so you're blocking inbound traffic, unless it's on certain ports or to certain applications. That's great. Then you've got the endpoint itself, right? You've got to try to lock that down. Don't let people run bad files. Don't let people run bad scripts. Don't let them go to bad websites. You got to lock that down. Then you got to realize that they plug in USB drives and they do bad things like that. They click on links in emails. You've got to protect against all these different things. So, when you look at your cybersecurity posture, you have to kind of look at this as a layered approach and do an assessment and say, well, how am I going to stop people at every single area? Right? And you've got to constantly be doing it. Right? Just like with sidewalks, with crosswalks, we're constantly, always looking at new ways. Right? If you go to London, they figured out that half the world there is tourists, and they don't know which way to look. Right? So they wrote it on the ground. Look right, left, whichever way you look there. Right? It's a constant evolution of understanding how hackers and how bad guys are trying to get in, and how you're going to protect against that particular threat. All right. So then the final thing is, no matter how much we try with these crosswalks and all these safety mechanisms, some people still just walk out in traffic and get killed. Right? No matter how hard you try, something bad is going to happen at the end of the day. You try as hard as possible to mitigate it. You try to protect and prevent as much as possible. Bad things still happen. This is where we look at saying, okay, well, you also need to prepare and understand and have a response plan to say, okay, if something bad happens, what am I going to do? Right? No matter how hard I try, I'm trying super hard. I've got all the right tools in place. The hackers, their entire game is to stay one or two steps ahead of the security tools that are available. And so you need to have a backup plan in place. And so a lot of that comes down to, well, if somebody gets in, what can they get access to? How can I restrict access and lock down the environment as much as possible? That if they get into one device, they can't move laterally. Or I have visibility into them moving laterally across my network, and I understand what's happening. Or I can just shut it down, throw the system against the wall, brick it, give the user a new one, get all their data back on it. Right? So kind of looking at it from that highest level, all the different layers of security, and then really the last one is protect the data, have a backup plan in place so you can get it back. Make sense? All right. Don't forget the 3-question rule. You don't have to wait until the end. All right, so this is kind of how Carbonite looks at the world and how Webroot, as we come together, look at the world. We say, okay, well, what our job is to give you the tools to make it really easy for you as a small business to apply these security best practices in a layered approach, right, across as much of the stack as we can. And we won't do everything. Right, you'll have to get tools from other people at some point. We recognize that. But giving you that layered approach, and then also understanding that at the bottom of it is something bad's eventually going to happen, and you've got to be prepared and have a backup plan for it. So this is kind of how we view the world and view our products coming together. So let's kind of deep dive a little bit onto how Webroot works. So first, I'll give you a question, since no one wants to ask me. How many people here use Webroot today? All right. Okay. Thank you, Webroot employees, for wrecking the average. All right. And how many people use Carbonite? I just see opportunity. Okay. All right, so perfect. So let me give you a little bit more understanding of how Webroot works and how Carbonite works, again, for the purpose of education so you guys can learn. So like I said, at Webroot, our goal on the Webroot side is to give you this layered security approach. So there's kind of 3 core areas that we layer this in. So the first is the actual, we'll start with kind of the most granular. A bad executable is running, right? We detect that executable, or I should say any executable is running. We detect it. We send it up to the cloud. We classify it in basically real time, give you a determination if it's good, bad, or unknown, and let it run or block it appropriately. It's a completely cloud-based solution. So this so things like zero-day threats, right? As soon as one person's seen a bad executable, we can protect everybody that's using our system, right? And even for that one person, you might say that guy sucks to be him. But actually, what we do is when we have an unknown executable, we have an algorithm that allows us to journal everything that executable is doing. And then if we later determine that it's bad, maybe it takes 10 minutes or 30 minutes or however long to classify it as bad, we roll back all the bad things that it did on that first person's computer. Right? So he has a bad couple of hours, CPU spiking while he's cryptojacking or whatever's happening. We figure that all out. We roll it back and protect that guy as well. So kind of cool. So everything's cloud-based. We use a machine learning and AI algorithm into it. One of the biggest things about our technology is that we have it deployed on over 67 million sensors. So those aren't just endpoints, but different sensors. So we're constantly feeding in data. I think we have the #1 big data platform for this, of data from across the world to classify URLs, to classify executables that are bad, to classify behaviors that are bad, to help us make these determinations really, really quickly. All right, so layer 1, right? An executable's running. I've got to figure out whether I'm going to let it run or not. If I do and it's bad, I can roll back and fix all the mistakes that I let it make. Second, one of the main things that malware tries to do is they get really smart. Okay, well, I'll take one executable, and I'm going to have it download another executable, right? Reach out to my command and control server and do that. And you can actually buy this on the dark web, too. I recently realized you can sign up for like a ransomware as a service program if you want to make a little bit more money on the side. It's a legitimate option that you can, well, it's not legitimate. It's a real option. Totally illegitimate. Totally illegitimate. Totally illegal. Okay, right, but so it might try to download other things. So our kind of next layer is we say, okay, well, I'll just won't let this computer go to any bad site, right? And you can define what bad sites is, right? We classify things as nefarious, but if you also want to use this to lock down your users from going to their favorite video sites, whatever those may be, or from social media sites, or from other streaming sites, or from Dropbox, if you try to blacklist that on your network, you can lock that down as well. So it gives you control as well on top of what we provide from a security perspective. All right, so if the executable is running, we protect it. If it tries to go somewhere else and download something bad, we can protect and stop that as well. And then the layer on top of that is, well, like I said, the hackers are always trying to stay a step ahead of us, right? And so the other layer that we provide is what I call the weakest link in the chain, which is humans. Humans are really, really bad people. They do all sorts of really dumb things. You guys literally live and breathe dumb users doing things all day, right? I lost my file. Okay, so what we also do is say it's really important that you educate your users about trying to apply best practices, right? You guys all know how to check when you click on a link or when you look at a link, you know how to hover on it. You know how to check if it's actually HTTPS. You can go and verify the certificate in the browser, right? Sally in accounting and Joe in wherever isn't necessarily as sophisticated as you guys. So providing them with training, whether it's something you do or whether it's other awareness training, best practices, is important as well. Right? If you can stop the weakest link, if you can make them slightly less weak, you improve your overall security posture of the business. Right? So we offer a security awareness training platform. A few things, certainly some really good content about training, about best practices. Right? Don't let someone tailgate you into the office, lock your computer, stuff like that. But also test phishing campaigns. So you can actually hold them, their feet to the fire to say, I sent you a test phishing email. You clicked on it. Now you've got to go through a more rigorous set of training because you proved that it's not working yet. One thing that we've seen for businesses that do security awareness training regularly, so about once a month for 12 months, there's a 70% reduction in bad things that they do, bad links that they click. Right? So it works, right? You can't just do it once. You've got to do it every single month, constantly running. But over time, these things actually do help. Right? Just like going to the gym. If you go to the gym once, it's really not going to get you very far. You've got to go to the gym every week, for a year, and then you start getting stronger. All right, so, like I said, it's kind of a complete picture that you need for understanding what your cybersecurity posture is, where your weak links are, and how you're gonna deal with that. All right, so on the Carbonite Webroot side, one of the things that we're really proud of is that we say we've recognized that SMBs just don't have enough time in the world, right? You don't have enough time to manage everything that you need to. Throwing on top of you and saying, well, you just got to find time to kind of do all this cybersecurity stuff, right? Something's got to give. So what we've tried to do is focus on making it as easy as possible to manage and deploy our solutions, right? So again, if you had a cybersecurity team of 10 people, we'd actually say you're probably not a good customer for us. Like, we actually don't focus on people that have a cybersecurity team of 10 people. What we do is focus on people that have a cybersecurity team of 1/10 of a person, right? That's you guys, and trying to make it so that you can do everything that you need to from what we offer in one place. So we've, as opposed to putting out 4 different agents, here's your endpoint agent, here's your DNS agent, here's this other thing, we've bundled things together into one portal, into one agent, into one experience for you. So you can go and send out campaigns to your users, you can manage anything that's going on, you can block list, block URLs, whitelist, blacklist things as required, all from one place, and apply it across all your users really simply. Right? You don't have to go and configure registry keys and GPOs for every single thing that you're doing and then try to manage it. You can do that, but you can also do a lot of things simply through our user interface. That also works really well if you have young techs, right? If you do have like a younger guy on your team or a younger girl on your team, teaching them about all sorts of Active Directory GPOs, they absolutely need to learn it. They're probably going to make mistakes. Giving them a modern user interface to do it through a website, probably something they're going to pick up in about half a second. So I think that can help as well from an overall cost of IT delivery. All right, and then, so that's kind of on the security side, right? So we can take the executables, we can see if it's bad or good. If it's bad, we'll stop it. If it's good, we let it run. If we don't know, we'll roll back anything that happened. And it's a global platform, so everybody's feeding in the intelligence. We can block bad sites from a DNS perspective, so don't even let people go to bad places or get bad information downloaded, and then educate them, because no matter how hard we try to block things, the users are the weakest link, and we've got to try to stay one step ahead. So then we turn to the doom and gloom side, which is, so I tried all of that, something still happened, right? And it does. That's why hackers are pretty smart. So this is where we come in with the data protection options. So I'll walk through some of these that we have. So the first thing that I like to recognize is that not every system is equal, right? If I look at, I like to use Carbonite as an example. My Mac laptop is not nearly as important as, the server that's running our e-com website, right? That thing's way more important than mine. On the flip side, my Mac laptop is way more important than someone else's, that they're doing. Okay, so we have different solutions that kind of target and use that mantra that not all systems are created equally. So if you look at your server infrastructure, most likely, you have 5 or 10% of your systems, a few of them that are really mission critical. That, if these things go down, like a whole lot of stuff's not going to work and bad things are going to happen. If you run an e-com site, if you're someone that's doing rapid billing, if you have a domain controller or your own DNS server that you're running, right, if that thing's down, it doesn't really matter what else is up because people can't log in. So we offer solutions that really try to target eliminating downtime and keeping mission-critical systems up. And then we recognize that, if that was as easy as it sounds and as cost as affordable as it sounds, you'd put that on everything. But obviously, you can imagine it's more expensive. So we have kind of more traditional backup systems that you probably put on everything, right? And then we have some systems for more long-term retention. So I kind of look at it as, the top tier, if something bad happens, or if those systems go down, bad things happen. In the middle, I need to get it back pretty quickly, but if it takes me a day or two, a couple hours, people might be upset, but the world's not going to end. And then you have the I need to get it back eventually type of data, right? Long-term archive or storage type systems that you can't lose. It's regulatory to have it, but you don't need to have it back up and running within 15 minutes, and you're not willing to pay to have it back up in 15 minutes. All right, so the first of this is our endpoint solution. Near and dear to my heart, my product. So on our endpoint solution, we have 2 different versions of it. So we have a Mac and a Windows agent that you install out, push it out through System Center, Intune, whatever you're using as your remote deployment technology, backs up all the files on it. You set the policy for what you want. Everything's encrypted before it leaves the network, deduplicated before it leaves the device, so it's super efficient and on your network, stored directly in the cloud. And then you can choose how you want to restore. Back to the original device, back to a new device. You can have the end users do it. You can prevent the end users from doing it. And you can do it all centrally from a single portal. Right, so if you want to push the data from Joe's laptop to Sally's laptop, or from Joe's laptop to Joe's new laptop, you can do that without ever leaving the comfort of your desk or your handheld device from a website. So pretty cool. The other thing that we've recognized is that a lot of data has moved from endpoints into Office 365. Right, so I would beg to argue about 85% of the people in here are using Office 365. Yep. All right. And so we've, a lot of people don't realize, but if you take, again, go back 5 years in history, we were all running on-premise SharePoint, on-premise Exchange servers, and a bunch of file servers. Right? That's all moved to the cloud. So no longer are most of you probably managing on-premise SharePoint or Exchange and dealing with, with the mapping rules, dealing with how to scale up your CPUs as it requires, licensing that as it's required. A lot of that's moved to the cloud. As that's happened, Microsoft has solved exactly one problem for you. They've solved what I call the hardware problem. Right, so you're no longer dealing with how does a failed hard drive on my Exchange server impact my business and how do I recover from that. Microsoft keeps it as a highly available solution. However, Microsoft is not responsible for the data. So Microsoft has no idea if a user is deleting a file because it was an accident, they don't need it, or a user's deleting a file because they're being super malicious and they're going to delete it, and they're going to delete it from the recycle bin, and now you've lost that important document. Right? Documents don't sound important, but a lot of people are storing important information in there. Right? A PO from a customer, a contract from a customer, things that you might not realize until day 91 when the recycle bin has expired that you actually need in that contract lawsuit with the customer to get them to pay their bill. Right? So you need access to your data. You need to have it protected from both malicious insiders as well as accidental deletions and other things like that. This is where our solution comes into play. So as these things move to the cloud, you don't have to deal with the hardware, but you are still responsible for the data. And so our solution covers all of the data. So the other thing with Office 365 that's happened is what I call data sprawl. So Microsoft is constantly introducing new tools for the end user productivity, right? They introduced Teams because they figured Skype was terrible. They've introduced Planner, Project, right? All these new tools. They're really great for end user productivity, but what it means is that your data starts to sprawl across Office 365, right? No longer do you have one important SharePoint site that everything lives in. You start having a Teams site. You have a group that someone created. Someone created a project or a planner board that you have no idea where it is. And so we focus on backing up as much content in Office 365 as we possibly can without your user interaction, so that no matter where that data is, when the user comes and says, I accidentally deleted my planner board and it had all the important stuff for this project, you can get it back in just a few clicks. All right, one moment. All right, like I said, not all systems are created equal. So Carbonite Endpoint in Office 365 is our solution for that end user data on the laptops or living in the cloud. Carbonite Server is our solution for, as you can guess it, servers. So with Carbonite Server, we have a really, really broad platform of what we cover. So we cover Windows, Linux, but also things that you may have lying around, AIX servers, HP UX servers, IBM iSeries. Sounds like really kind of crazy stuff, but actually if you work with financial institutions, they seem to have a lot of IBM servers. So we have a really, really broad platform support. If you're still running something really old, right, and you don't have the budget to upgrade it, Carbonite Server has such a vast support that it probably is going to meet your needs. And as you upgrade things, it will continue to meet your needs evolving going forward. So Carbonite Server, there's a couple ways you can deploy this. You can do a direct-to-cloud backup directly to our cloud. You can do an on-prem backup, so store it locally. You can do both, right? The good 3-2-1 rule, where you want a local copy and off-site copy as well. And then we also have appliances built in. So if you don't want to have to worry about sizing on-prem local appliances and local hardware, we can give you an all-in-one solution so that actually as your data size increases, right, because data size typically increase, if you ever outgrow your appliance, we just ship you a new one, and you don't have to worry about it. Right? So as opposed to sizing up your hardware, hoping you get it right, guessing your rate of growth over the next 5 years, you can just buy into a kind of hardware as a service subscription, and if your hardware, if you exceed the capacity of your hardware, we ship you a new one out in a couple of days. All right. The other part of Carbonite Server, like I mentioned, all systems are not created equally. So for those top-tier systems that can't go down, we have a real-time replication engine where you can replicate that data either to your own secondary server, right, if you have your own secondary data center or another offsite location that you use, or replicate it directly to the Carbonite cloud. Anything happens to the primary system, you fail over to the cloud in a matter of seconds, maybe minutes, and you're up and running. Right? And you can hook it up to VPN, so if you need other servers to talk to it, you can. And it's not just a single server solution. So when a lot of people start talking about cloud failover, what they mean is I'll give you one server running in the cloud over RDP, which is like the least secure thing they could possibly do. But it's really easy. So what we do with our solutions is we can give you your entire environment. So you can define the boot order to say, well, first boot my domain controller, then boot my database server, then I want you to run a couple of scripts to reconfigure things, and then I'd like you to boot up the web server and send me an email saying, all set. So you can configure all of this orchestration within the platform as well, so that you have that fast failover. The other thing I really like about this solution is it's not just for that terrible situation. You can use it to actually test your failover without taking your systems offline. So you can boot them into a sandbox to test, which is great for your compliance regulations. When they say, have you tested your backups? You can go and click one button and say, yep, I tested it and it worked, without having to put a lot of effort. Also, I was talking to a gentleman last night, and we realized he only had one server. And so when he had to do things like patching the server, he was taking, giving up his Saturday night, right? Well, I've got to patch it during off hours because it's pretty important to the business. And if I do it during the day, it's going to be impactful. So, we kind of realized, well, you could actually fail over to the cloud, run it for a little bit while you patch that server, or maybe you do a full system upgrade if you need to get to a later OS or later SQL version. Everything's running fine, right, in the cloud while you do that. And then when you're all done, you can fail back to that server. So this way you can keep things up running in a more high availability state without having to actually invest in a second piece of hardware that could be costly for you. All right, and then one thing we realized with that technology is, okay, well, if you can fail over to another server, almost instantaneous, there's kind of a couple of use cases for that. Well, one is, like I said, the first server went down, and so I need to boot in the cloud for disaster recovery. But the other scenario is I might just need to move my server from one place to another, right? So maybe you're getting off a really old physical server and trying to virtualize it. Maybe you're taking some of your on-prem infrastructure and moving it to a public cloud, moving to Azure VMs or AWS. Or maybe you moved to the cloud, you realized it was way more expensive than you thought, didn't quite perform as well as you thought, and you want to move it back on premise, right? Or you realize Microsoft really jacked their rates, you want to move to AWS. So we have this tool called Carbonite Migrate that lets you kind of constantly replicate data between two servers and then do a failover and never fail back. So it's a migration of the data. So if you find yourself, hey, I need to move these servers from on-prem to the cloud, or I need to move them from an old physical server to a new one, or I need to move, I'm consolidating my two data centers into one, Carbonite Migrate is a really easy way to do that. It's a one-time fee per license per server. You install it in the guest, and so it can replicate basically across any hypervisor. It's hypervisor agnostic in near real time. So every time you commit something to disk, it gets replicated off to the secondary server, right, the target server, and then at some point you can just shut that off and fail over. I also really like it for maintenance windows because I find a lot of maintenance windows you schedule for a certain time to do a server migration or a cutover, and then something happens last minute and you need to postpone the migration. Really easy to do this with the tool because it's constantly keeping it up to date. So you don't have to worry about doing any sort of last resync right before you do it or running a bunch of work leading up to that window. At least from our perspective, certainly there are other elements as part of that migration. You can make sure that this is kind of one thing you don't have to worry about. It's constantly in sync, constantly replicating. You just fail over when you need to. All right. So hopefully at this point, you start to understand why you need some of the protection. Right? There's a lot of different things that the bad guys are trying to do. They're trying to attack the users to get into the network. They're trying to attack the exploits and things that are vulnerabilities on the server. They're trying to do anything they can to download other, to get one piece of good-looking software onto the server and then download other things and use that to do bad stuff. And ultimately, they're trying to make money off of you. Right? They're trying to either get data out, exfiltrate the data. They're trying to encrypt the data with ransomware to get you to pay. Their whole goal in life is to make your life miserable and to make it so miserable that you'll hopefully pay them or they'll find some way to make money off of you. Right? So this is kind of why we look at the complete solution as saying, okay, well, again, back to my silly crosswalk analogy, you've got to take as many approaches as you possibly can to protect yourself, and then you've got to realize that no matter what you do, something bad's still going to happen and have a backup plan in place. All right. Like I said, we're going to lock the doors until people ask 3 questions, but you've got the first one.
Which is more common or the worst case scenario, the exfiltration or the ransomware?
So the question for everyone is, what's more common, exfiltration or ransomware? I don't know if there's a statistic on that, partially because exfiltration, a lot of it goes unnoticed and unknown. So I certainly don't have a statistic on it. I can say one of the things that we've certainly seen is an increase in ransomware, and it's a lot because people are paying for it. So a lot of people are getting hit. They don't have basic protection in place, and they've got no choice but to pay up. The data exfiltration we seem to only hear about when it's measured in the millions of records. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. Yeah.
How do you protect on-prem backup data from ransomware?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you protect on-prem backup data from ransomware? So there's a couple of I should ask, sorry. Do you mean within Carbonite's technology specifically, or as a general practice?
In general practice.
In general practice. So I can give you a couple tips. Other people might want to chime in as well. Put your backup, don't be running things as admin credentials on both your server and the backup. Try to isolate networks as much as possible. Plugging in an external hard drive and having it directly attached to the system and then backing up to that doesn't count, right? Because whatever they're running on the machine can write to any of the mounted or mapped drives. So if you're using things like HTTPS over the network as opposed to CIFS-share, that's going to, I think, provide an additional level of security. And then you should actually ask some of the backup vendors how they authenticate their connections. This is a question, I'll give you my little tip. Whenever we go to acquire a company, and at Carbonite, I think I've been part of 5 acquisitions, we sit down across the table from them, and we get into these super detailed discussions. And we always ask them this question: how do you authenticate your connection to the server? Right? And if they kind of look at us like, what? What do you mean? How do I authenticate? Username and password. We kind of just say they don't know what they're doing. But the proper companies will know and be able to say, well, what we do is we first download the certificate, we verify the certificate against the machine store, we use certificate pinning to validate these things. We're rotating passwords. We have OpenID Connect type authentication in place. Understanding that's a super technical level of detail, but making sure that you're actually asking vendors how they're authenticating connections and that they have a reasonable answer or documentation to give you, really I think does help protect against that. Yep.
I heard you mention that you're encrypted in transit. Are you also encrypted at rest?
Yep, so the question for Carbonite, I said that we're encrypting in transit. Are we also encrypted at rest? Yeah, everything on the Carbonite side is encrypted. So for Carbonite server and Carbonite endpoint, the data is encrypted before, actually for all of them, before it leaves the device. It's encrypted over a TLS 1.2 channel before it sits in its final destination and remains encrypted at the final destination as well. Yep. And all of the products I talked about are AES 256-bit encryption as well.
Do you back up like Google and everything? Because I heard you say Office 365.
Yep. So question, do we back up Google? Because I mentioned Office 365. We do not. We do not. Office 365, not Google. Yep.
Is that granular backup and recovery of Office 365?
Yeah, so a question about Office 365. So it's, yes, it's granular. So you can choose the way when you first come into the application, and if you guys want demos, we have obviously demos at our booth downstairs for all of these too. But for Office 365, we have what we call Express Mode and Advanced Mode. Express Mode, you just say, I want OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange, and then we get everything within those applications, right? So all of the users in OneDrive or SharePoint. Or we have an Advanced Mode where you can create rules, mostly based on Active Directory elements, to say only backup users that have a business premium license or an E1 license and are in marketing and are assigned to Colorado. So you can get it super granular. And then for restore, you can do either at like an entire SharePoint site, a particular folder, or a particular, all the way down to object level. So one file in OneDrive, one email in Exchange, et cetera. Yeah, okay, sorry. You're right in front of the light.
This is more of a general question. There is cyber insurance is kind of popular these days. Do you think that affects best practices in environment?
Yeah, so a question for everyone is cyber insurance is becoming more and more popular. Is this a best practice? I'm probably going to give you the best question because I don't really know best practices on cyber security, insurance, on cyber insurance. Tim, do you have any thoughts on best practices around cyber insurance?
I think the companies that are starting to spend money on cyber insurance already have best practices in place. That's usually one of the last things that we're starting to see in the SMB space. Most of the enterprises have some type of cybersecurity policy. Most SMBs don't. The ones that do have some of the best security practices that we've seen. So I don't know if I would say that they're relying on that as their most safe. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah. Actually, one other thing we have seen come up quite a bit is in order to get cyber insurance, you have to usually pass an audit.
That's true.
Right? They don't want to insure somebody who is high risk. And there's no, what's the medical one? Prior coverage? Pre-existing condition? Yeah, there's no pre-existing condition clause in cyber insurance. But so a lot of people actually, they can be fairly rigorous, especially if you're a larger business or taking out a large policy, but fairly rigorous audits to get that insurance at a reasonable rate. Yeah.
Some of them, instead of doing that, they just give a phrase in their insurance saying you have to properly secure your network, and that way they always got an opt-out if they say you got breached because it's your fault and they don't have to pay anything. So you got to check that on cyber insurance as well.
Yeah, that's kind of questionable, but yeah.
Something goes wrong, then we're not.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm going to start that cyber insurance business. Like, well,
And that's what ended up happening with us is we went looking at cyber insurance, and they gave us a list, and it basically turned out to be our best practices, and it was our roadmap. And once we had finished that, the insurance was happy, but we were also happy because we had achieved
yeah.
best practice based on somebody who
Yeah.
did their job.
I mean, it's not a bad way to get an assessment, written, right? So you can really understand where your gaps are, where you want to focus. Yeah, I can say every once in a while we have cybersecurity, or excuse me, I'm mixing the term, cyber insurance vendors coming to us and actually saying, hey, can we resell or can we bundle your solution because if a business is using backup, then our risk from an underwriter perspective is lower. So we'd actually like to almost, whether they give it away or resell it or whatever their model is, because they know how important it is for people to have a backup in place. Now, they're being super selfish, right? They only care about their bottom line, but it's a true statement for everyone, right? That if you have that, it lowers your overall risk. All right, other questions?
Do you back up to other clouds or just your own?
Do we back up to other clouds or just our own? It depends on the product. So most of them are just our own. Some of them you can bring your own cloud in either on-premise or public cloud, like in Azure mode. So like our server product, you can do it your own data center, and our endpoint product, you can do your own Azure if you'd like. But it's not a general anywhere to anywhere type of offering. It's more targeted. Right? It's really hard to secure anywhere to anywhere solutions. Other questions? All right, then a couple housekeeping. So we're giving away Apple AirPods, if you didn't hear. Did everyone get their business card in? Or their name? No? Okay, come on up. Or pass it over, whatever works. Sanjay, I'm putting you on the bottom. You're going on the bottom. Cool. Well, the trick, Sanjay, if you put it on top, once I shake it, now you're on the bottom. If you had put it in at the beginning, and then I shook it, you'd be on top. Everyone got it in to win? All right, cool. So the winner, Tim's going to choose the winner. All right, sufficiently shooken up. Good luck. Good luck, Sanjay. No, you're not getting it. Bill Huff is getting it. Yeah, who? Where's Bill? No, this is pretty clearly Bill Huff from the Collective Group. No? He left? Yeah. I'm not hunting him down.
He didn't want to listen to all the questions. Answers.
We're a cybersecurity company. We're going to have identity verification here as part of this. Steve Diggory? Yeah. Let me check.
That's me.
Do you have a photo ID?
I do.
I'll go with it. So, all right. So obviously, we're downstairs, both Carbonite and Webroot. If you guys want to see the solutions, if you want to demo it, if you want to put your hands on it and set up a trial, you can do all these types of things. If you just want to geek out about the technology, we've got like 4 or 5 technical people, 4 or 5 marketing people down there. We can do all of that as well. So look forward to talking to you later. Thanks.